Robert Hunter brought a typewriter to a government drug experiment in 1962. Not a notebook, a typewriter. He was 20 years old, sitting in a room at the Menlo Park Veterans Administration Hospital, about to be dosed with LSD by researchers working, without his knowledge, for the Central Intelligence Agency. He knew enough to know something strange was going to happen. He had already read Aldous Huxley. He thought that was the point. He had no idea it would be the last time he was ever fully on the other side of the room. Before there was a Grateful Dead, before there was Haight Ashbury, before Owsley Stanley set up his first clandestine laboratory, there was a 20-year-old folk singer in a government clinic in Menlo Park, being handed a glass of LSD by a researcher working for Sidney Gottlieb's division of the CIA through a chain of foundations none of the subjects fully understood. Robert Hunter was part of the scene that became the Grateful Dead. He was also, according to the band's official biographer, the first of them to get there. Dennis McNally, in A Long Strange Trip, put it plainly. Hunter's participation in those 1962 experiments was the first substantial experience any of the Grateful Dead had with psychedelic drugs. Not first among the hate scene, first among the dead. By 1994, Hunter was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not as a solo inductee, but as a member of the Grateful Dead, the only non-performer ever inducted that way. The institution decided the songs were the band, and Hunter was half the songs. Ripple, Dark Star, Broke Down Palace, Addicts of My Life, Friend of the Devil, Truckin'. After about 1967 that gave the Dead their lyrical weight, Hunter wrote it or co-wrote it with Garcia. The version that gets told most often about where the Dead came from starts with Ken Kesey and the acid tests. This channel covered Kesey in March. It's in the archive. What that story tends to miss is this. The same Stanford-run government program that went through Kesey also got Robert Hunter a couple of years later, and it got him before he wrote a single word for the band. In 1953, the Central Intelligence Agency formalized a program called MK-Ultra. The stated purpose was chemical interrogation, a Cold War program built on the fear that enemy states had already cracked the question of a truth serum or were close to it. The agency had already, in the years after World War II, recruited scientists who'd studied mescaline under Nazi auspices. McNally documents this in The Last Great Dream. They wanted to know if LSD could make a person pliable, suggestible, open to direction, so they started testing it on volunteers in universities and hospitals, and they hid the money. That's how a government experiment ended up at a Bay Area hospital without the receiving researchers necessarily knowing who was actually paying. The CIA routed funding through front foundations, the Geschichter Fund for Medical Research, the Society for the Study of Human Ecology, the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation. Stephen Kinzer wrote the definitive biography of Sidney Gottlieb, Poisoner-in-Chief, drawing on a trove of declassified documents. Kinzer was direct. Gottlieb set up bogus foundations that contacted university clinics and hospitals. The people administering the LSD, in many cases, thought the money came from legitimate medical research. That was the design, which is why what Hunter encountered looked on the surface like a university study. The physician running it, Leo Hollister, published his work in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease in 1960, clinical protocol, peer-reviewed, the drugs, LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, D-tran, 16 subjects in the published study. Hunter came later in the same program, and he brought a typewriter. If you're a deadhead who spent years with these songs and never knew who actually handed the Dead their first acid, this channel does this every week. Subscribe. The archive goes deep. Hunter was transparent in 1988 about exactly what he'd walked into. Terry Gross interviewed him on Fresh Air. NPR rebroadcast and transcribed that interview in September of 2019, the week Hunter died. Hunter described the program on his own terms, on whether they'd told him what it was really about. Nothing. They didn't want me to know a thing about it, and I lied to them. I told them that I knew nothing about it, and I had read Doors of Perception, in fact. So, a young man who'd already read Huxley walking into a government clinic telling the researchers he had no prior knowledge of the subject, settling in with his typewriter. The protocol Hunter described was precise. He was paid $140. That's his own number, told to Terry Gross in his own words in 1988. Not a figure from McNally or from press coverage. $140 total for 4 weeks of testing. First week, LSD. Second week, psilocybin. Third week, mescaline. Fourth week, all three together. And Hunter's telling every 2 hours, 5 cubic centimeters of blood drawn. The program called what it was, studying psychotomimetic drugs. Hunter's description of the stated research goal. And they called it, the word at the time was psychotomimetic drugs, miming psychosis. and they wanted to find out if it increased your ability to be hypnotized and to take suggestions. That's the official framing, a hypnotic suggestibility study, whether the volunteers could be made more open to direction. What they got with Hunter was something else. In one of the on-acid sessions, the researchers were trying to hypnotize Hunter while he was peaking on LSD. His account to Terry Gross, all of a sudden, tears began running out of my eyes. And the psychologist said, "Well, what's happening here?" And I said, "I'm out in the fifth dimension somewhere, and I'm a great jade green Buddha. And there's a pool growing out of my lap, and the water of the pool is running out of my eyes. I'm not really crying." Then I think they began twigging that they were onto something a little bit more than a simple heightening of suggestibility here. Notice what Hunter did. He narrated it, dissolved into a jade green Buddha in the fifth dimension, and he's still giving the psychologist a field report. McNally described Hunter before the experiment as someone who'd already written a Romana Clay, the silver snarling trumpet, that demonstrated genuine literary range. Hunter had skill at storytelling and an ear for dialogue before he ever sat down in that clinic. He didn't walk in as a guinea pig looking for beer money. He walked in as a writer who thought, in his words, "It'll be fun. I'll take my typewriter and no telling what'll come out." A typewriter to a government hypnosis experiment. The money difference matters, by the way, because it's been blurred in the press for years. The figure that circulates most often, $75, was Kesey's rate per session, documented in Stanford magazine and corroborated in Lee and Schleyen's Acid Dreams. Hunter's $140 was the total across the full 4-week protocol, and it came straight from Hunter's mouth. The Dupree's Diamond News Archive adds a third figure, $20 per tab, which tells you these weren't standardized payments, different arrangements for different subjects in a program that was bureaucratically designed to be hard to trace. Kinzer's assessment of where that money ultimately originated was direct. In an interview with the Palo Alto Online in October of 2019, Kinzer said, "Stanford was where Allen Ginsberg took his first LSD, also where Robert Hunter, the lyricist for the Grateful Dead, first took LSD. So these guys were turned on by Sidney Gottlieb from the CIA. And then Robert Hunter turned on the Grateful Dead with all of Sidney Gottlieb's acid." That's Kinzer, a historian working from declassified documents. No primary document has surfaced with Hunter's name in a CIA program ledger. Since the money was filtered through front foundations, participants' names would typically never appear in agency records at all. That was the design. But the chain, the CIA to Gottlieb, is documented, and Hunter was in the program. The spread from there follows a logic once you understand the network. Kesey, who'd been through the same Menlo Park program a couple of years before Hunter, had started throwing parties on Perry Lane. That was the bohemian enclave near Stanford, where writers, musicians, and artists overlapped in the early 1960s. Garcia was part of that scene. Jerry Garcia had met Hunter in 1961. Garcia 18, Hunter 19, playing the same Palo Alto folk circuit. The LSD that Kesey had obtained from contacts made during and after the formal trials started moving through the Perry Lane circle. Lee and Schleyen's Acid Dreams, their social history of LSD, built on approximately 20,000 pages of declassified CIA and military documents, confirms it. Kesey's parties drew a young musician named Jerry Garcia, along with writers Robert Stone and Larry McMurtry. The Dead's origins sit directly in that Perry Lane social network. And the acid in that network came from the Menlo Park VA. Robert Hunter turned on the Grateful Dead with all of Sidney Gottlieb's acid. Hunter didn't officially become the band's primary lyricist until around 1967. He was in New Mexico when the Dead formed. In Hunter's own telling, he started sending lyrics to Garcia from there. St. Stephen, China Cat, Sunflower. Garcia asked him to return. Hunter hitchhiked to California and met up with the band in Rio Neto, Sonoma County, where they were playing that September. He wrote the words to Dark Star right then. What emerged from that connection carried a specific quality that hadn't been in the early Dead music. Mystic space, dissolution, the sense of being somewhere without good maps. Terry Gross asked Hunter directly in that 1988 interview whether tripping had changed the kind of lyrics he was writing. Hunter: "Oh, it had to. I was tripping around in mystic space and making the mystic connections, which I think were right for the time. No hedging, no perhaps, or I imagine. The man who wrote those songs said the psychedelics changed the direction, changed what he was reaching for. He didn't name a specific lyric. He named the whole orientation. By 1970, the orientation had produced Working Man's Dead and American Beauty, released roughly 5 months apart, both recorded in weeks. Still the peak of what Hunter and Garcia built together. McNally was direct. Garcia's early lyrical instincts were superficial. The band's music had minor lyrical depth until Hunter took over as primary writer. What came after was different in kind. Ripple, Broke Down Palace, Attics of My Life, Box of Rain. That last song requires some care because the title of this video invokes it, and the honest version of this story is precise about what it's claiming. Hunter wrote Box of Rain for Phil Lesh. Lesh's father was dying. Lesh had composed the music, the complete melodic structure, every vocal, phrasing already mapped, and needed words that would fit exactly. Hunter wrote it fast. In his own anthology, A Box of Rain, Lyrics, 1965 to 1993, Hunter's head note, Phil Lesh wanted a song to sing to his dying father and had composed a piece complete with every vocal nuance but the words. If ever a lyric wrote itself, this did, as fast as the pen would pull. No documented line connects Box of Rain to the 1962 Menlo Park sessions. It was written for a dying man, out of grief, in 1970. The title puts them next to each other because both things are true. Hunter was paid to hallucinate in 1962, and he later wrote Box of Rain. But he never claimed one produced the other. For the documented psychedelic to lyric link, the song is China Cat Sunflower. McNally sourced it directly, pages 52 and 215 of A Long Strange Trip. Hunter, in what he called a hypersensitive state, in Mexico near Lake Chapala, a cat lying on his belly. In Hunter's own words, I had a cat sitting on my belly, and I was in a rather hypersensitive state and followed this cat out to, I believe it was Neptune. That's where China Cat Sunflower came from, a hallucination documented by Hunter himself, Aoxomoxoa, 1969. The broader claim that the experiments changed what he was reaching for, Hunter made himself without qualification on record. Not which song, the whole direction. Now, about the room, Kesey described it in 1988 in Stanford magazine. He described how the scientists had found something they couldn't control or quite bring themselves to enter. They didn't have the guts to do it themselves, so they hired students. Hey, we found this room. Would you please go inside and let us know what's going on in there? When we came back out, they took one look at us and said, whatever they do, don't let them go back in that room. Hunter went back in the room. Not literally, but the room didn't close. On June 8th, 1969, 7 years after Menlo Park, Hunter had what McNally described in the Deadcast Working Man's Dead 50th Anniversary series as a horrific night alone. He was a few weeks short of his 28th birthday. Hunter experienced, in McNally's account, something close to multiple deaths. He saw blood pouring from Janis Joplin's mouth. Hunter lived through every assassination he'd known of. He came out the other side and wrote Black Peter. Two events, 7 years apart. The 1962 sessions were the first crossing. June 8th, 1969, was the return. What connects them isn't a specific substance or a specific program. It's that Hunter kept going, and what he brought back each time went into the work. McNally's line about the 1962 experiment is the one to hold, the first substantial experience any of the Grateful Dead had with psychedelic drugs. It's not saying Hunter got there before Kesey. Kesey went first. Blair Jackson makes that clear in Garcia, An American Life. Hunter came a couple of years after him. In Jackson's phrasing, Kesey was at the Menlo Park around 1960 to 61. Hunter around 1962. What McNally's sentence is saying is narrower and more specific. Among the people who became the Grateful Dead, Hunter was first, before Garcia, before any of them. The man who wrote the songs that defined what the Dead were philosophically, he was the first of that circle to go through the door. Hunter's favorite line, the one he told Rolling Stone in 2015, he actually believed, adding, I believe it, is in Ripple. Let it be known there is a fountain that was not made by the hands of men. That line reaches for something outside of human construction, a source that didn't originate in the things people build and classify and fund. Sacred in the specific sense, not made by hands. The man who believed it first walked toward whatever that belief is inside a government building in Menlo Park, California. Researchers drawing his blood every 2 hours. A program funded through front foundations by an intelligence apparatus that had recruited former Nazi scientists and was trying to build a better interrogation tool. A fountain not made by the hands of men, arrived at through a program built entirely by the hands of men with security clearances and a classified budget. That's the contradiction at the center of this, and it's not a contradiction that resolves neatly. The visions they paid Hunter to report didn't stay in the clinic. They became the vocabulary of a band, and with songs like Ripple and Broke Down Palace, something close to secular American sacred music. Hunter said the experiences had to have changed his writing, and the writing is what's left. If you spent this time with this video because you care about what the Grateful Dead actually were, not the legend, but the architecture underneath it, subscribe. I do this every week. There are videos in the archive on Garcia, on Pigpen, on the Wall of Sound, on what the band became after Garcia died, that go this deep and stay this specific. This channel is built for you, if you already know the basics and want to know what's underneath them. Part 2 of this series goes where the dead books don't quite go. We've covered the 1962 experiment from Hunter's side of the door. Part 2 covers what was happening on the other side, what the CIA was gathering from these programs nationally, how far it reached beyond the volunteers, and how the whole operation eventually surfaced in the church committee hearings of the mid-1970s. That one drops soon. I'll put it right here. One thing that didn't make it into this video, the program Hunter entered wasn't only studying whether LSD increased suggestibility in willing volunteers, the same MK Ultra apparatus was simultaneously running experiments on non-consenting subjects, delivering the drug without knowledge or agreement to test whether it could be used covertly. Same program, same period, same chain of front foundations, the 1962 sessions where Hunter brought his typewriter and reported back like a writer. They were the clean end of something that got very dark very fast. That's part 2.